Hey guys, John Polemy here, Actionable Intelligence. Today is Saturday, October 29th, and this is the weekly market update. The disclaimer, anything that you hear or see on this video or podcast is not to be taken as investment advice. I'm not a registered financial advisor. I cannot give you personal financial advice. This is for informational purposes only. Please do your own due diligence and your own research. It's your money. It's your responsibility. Okay, let's get started. So I hate to say, that we're ahead of the curve or that we're right, but, we were talking about this eventuality even last year when the energy crisis, we forecasted an energy crisis. This was before the war in Ukraine. The Western Europeans were already, or Europe was heading for a energy crisis already. The world was before the war. And we said that, or I said that, what were going to be second order effects of this was the energy intensive industries in Europe. And so when the Russians did invade Ukraine, and then the sanctions were put on Russia, the Europeans, specifically Germany, basically tied, that's what basically fuels Germany's industrial might, right? Was cheap, large volumes of relatively cheap gas coming from Russia. And so when that was cut off, it was just inevitable that this was going to happen. And I'm going to make a comment here that the people in power in Germany, a lot of people say, well, this is part of their agenda. This is what they were working towards. I'm not going to say it was part of the plan, because I think that they actually thought when they put the sanctions on that would collapse the political regime in Russia, and they would get a more amicable regime in power there that would do their bidding, they being the European Union. But that didn't happen. And so, this is folly on top of folly. And so here's what you have. You have exactly what we said was going to happen, because you cannot, natural gas and various other oil and other hydrocarbons, condensate, these are particular feedstocks for the chemical industry, right? For making plastics, for making olefins, for making waxes, for making all kinds of things that most people listening to this don't even know what I'm talking about. Organic chemistry is a course that I took, and we did all these things in the lab, right? We made distillate towers, we made olefins, we made fragrances, we made flavors. This is what all this stuff comes from. And people just don't conceive, again, you go to the drugstore to buy lipstick. If you're a woman, you just, your main idea is what shade to select, not what are the components that go into making that. The same for most consumers, right? And so this is what we said would happen. And so what's happening? BASF, which is one of the largest, if not largest, chemical manufacturers in the world, that has about 20% of its worldwide operations in Germany, says that it will downsize permanently in Germany. And links to the article, I think this was an FT article. Some of the stuff is behind a paywall. I will give you a link that somebody else gave me that allows you to get behind these paywalls and get to the articles, but I'll put that in the show notes below. You can check that out. Of course, links to most of these articles will be there. BASF has said it will have to downsize, quote, permanently in Europe. This is what we said. They weren't going to shut them down temporarily. You can't shut these units down, just let them sit. Once they get shut down, they stay shut down. With high energy costs making the region increasingly uncompetitive. The statement from the world's largest chemicals group by revenue came after it opened the first part of its $10 billion plastics engineering facility in China a month ago, which it said would support growing demand in the country. Brudermuller, this is the CEO of BASF, said the European gas crisis, coupled with stricter industry regulations in the EU, was forcing the company to cut costs in the region as quickly as possible and also permanently. Okay, well, there you go. There you go. 20% of their business, they're going to downsize. they're going to move. Now, if you're the Peter Zions of the world, you think, that that's all going to come to the U.S. But where are you going to build all these chemical facilities in the U.S.? Maybe in Texas, maybe in Louisiana, okay? Not in California, okay? Not in New York State, not increasingly likely in places like Pennsylvania where you have the feedstock from the Marcellus right there. No, it's going to go to China and India, these other places with low cost labor, low regulatory burden. This is not hard to figure out. And so I'm going to talk about later on in the Clown World segments, later on at the end of the video, which I'm going to separate those just as a housekeeping note, that the economic stuff and the investment stuff be on the front end of the video. And then people that don't like my politics or don't like me, standing, yelling at you to get off the front lawn or screaming at the moon, they can sign off. They won't have to be subjected to that. But I'll talk more about what I think about this politically at the end of the video. Anyways, to consider going on, Bruder-Muller, who has previously warned that an embargo on Russian gas would plunge Germany into its biggest crisis since the Second World War, said on Wednesday the cost cuts were necessary to, quote, safeguard our medium and long-term competitiveness in Germany and Europe. So I'm going to suggest to you that, this is not like some master plan, because the dolts that I see, and I'll name them, Habeck, Baerbauer, Schultz, the whole German elite class is just the same as the rest of the EU elite so-called leadership class. It's tired, it's worn out, it has no ideas. It's on this playbook for this, and this is going to drag the EU down. Okay, that's what's going to happen. So what are the people that are going to get laid off going to do? Learn the code? You have to, if you're going to we saw what happens in the United States when you get rid of all the manufacturing in the Rust Belt. Okay. So this is not positive in my mind, but people maybe in Germany should be listening to Bruder-Muller because he forecasted this would happen, and he's pretty prescient. So maybe he should be called in and give some advice to the German government, but I doubt that will happen. There's people in the government there, like Habeck. He's not sad that this is happening. He's a green zealot, and if the industries are shutting down, in his mind, that's good, right? Because they're polluters. Here we go. This was an article. So that Germany, with the Energiewende, the energy transition, spending $500 billion on solar and wind to combat climate change. Well, now that they're in an energy crisis, they're scrambling around, they being the Germans, to get any type of energy they can. So what do we have? We have this report come in this week that Germany is now going to demolish like part of a wind farm so that they can get to the underlying lignite coal under that, because they're now being forced to burn coal, dirty lignite coal, by the way. It's more closer to the surface, i.e. brown coal, which has a lower caloric value and is more polluting than normal coal. Here you go. I mean, you can't make it up. The jokes write themselves. I mean, it says here, Germany is dismantling a wind farm. We're not dismantling the whole wind farm. It's like 8 turbines, I think, to expand I can't pronounce it, Garzweiler lignite mine. It's literally being deconstructed for more coal mining. Yes. The solution is nuclear power. The Germans are not going to build nuclear power until they get a different government in there. That's your solution long term. That's becoming more and more recognized around the world. If you're not going to reconcile with Russia and get the gas flowing again, then your choices are going to be limited to what you can do. And they're going to increasingly find this out. But I just found this amusing, because this is energy policy. This is a legitimate, well thought out energy policy. It's not. And to tell me that the masters of the universe, this is all planned, they don't know what they're doing. They're operating in 15-minute ahead increments, everything always with all of this is politics all the time. And then people say, well, why are we talking about politics? Because you have to pay attention to what's going on. That's how they're making their decisions based on, whether or not they're going to be able to stay in power. Not that there's some long-term plan in Germany. Okay, the energy Wende did not work. No one will acknowledge that. Outside observers look at it. Putting solar panels on in northern Germany at 9% capacity factor. Does that make sense to anyone? And now you're demoing the same wind turbines that were going to solve the problem so you can get at dirty coal because you've alienated your main energy producer, Russia. Okay, awesome. That seems to be working out real well. Is that a plan? Is that really a written down plan somewhere? So here we go. Rishi Sunak, the new PM in the UK. This guy looks like he just came off a robotic assembly line. This guy has got to be maybe the most boring human on earth. Look at these people that are in Theresa May, Boris Johnson, Liz Truss, Rishi Sunak. I mean, where are they getting these fools? So one thing that Liz Truss did do was she was going to push in her 45 days as Prime Minister of the UK, she was suggesting that the ban on fracking be lifted because, as I've said before, the UK has a tremendous amount of potential gas, tight gas formations. I mean, in the trillions of cubic feet. And there was a ban before put on, I think, in 2019. And so Truss was like, okay, well, we're going to lift the ban and then, try to work with local communities because we have an energy crisis and we have all this resource that maybe we should consider developing. So the first thing that Mr. Sunak did when he got in power is reverse that. So we went back to the ban. Okay. So in his first appearance in Parliament as PM on Wednesday, Mr. Sunak said he's going to stick with his Conservative Party's 2019 campaign promise to maintain a ban on hydraulic fracturing technology to drill for gas under the English countryside. Well, this is why, because there's a lot of people in the countryside that support the Conservative Party. And so people are scared of fracking. People are scared of development. Again, NIMBY, right? Not in my backyard. Or banana, build absolutely nothing anywhere near anyone. So, in the meantime, you're in an energy crisis and you have no plan. Here's what's interesting. This is why there's no plan and why I detest these people. Mr. Sunak also supported fracking during his failed leadership bid against Ms. Truss over the summer. But now that he's succeeded her as PM, he is hanging on the fantasy that renewables and nuclear power can meet all of Britain's energy needs. Without natural gas or a credible plan to produce more of it, Mr. Sunak's energy strategy is no strategy at all. His agenda of tax increases and European-style regulation already foretells a low-growth Britain. Under his energy policies, Britain could be colder and darker too. Listen, this guy is a WEF stooge. He's a globalist stooge put in there. He's got the resume, okay? And you want to hear something even more, people don't understand these things. This guy is placed into power. No one voted for him, okay? And if there wasn't an election in the UK right now, the Labour Party would get in. And it would just be Keir Starmer, who's another globalist stooge. You can't get out of this, folks, by voting. I keep telling you that. You're not going to get out of this by voting. You think you are. You're given the illusion of choice. These people are all globalists. They have an agenda, okay? The agenda is not to make your life better, okay, or to help you. The agenda is to serve their masters in Brussels and the globally wealthy globalist elite. That's it. It's not a conspiracy. People of wealth and power conspire. You want to hear something funnier? This guy's father-in-law is the main guy at Infosys. Infosys is a company that does software and all this stuff in India, and that's the company that rolled out the social digital system, Andhar system in India. Okay. Do you get it now? Do you see how all these people are connected? You're not just going to get some outsider in there. It's like when I worked in the power plant. They post jobs for a plant manager like at Duke or AEP or whatever. You're not going to apply. You're not going to be an outsider and apply for that job and get it. They post it so they can say that they posted the job and it was competitive. They already know who they're putting in those roles. Those people have been groomed for years inside the company through mentorship programs, through development programs to put the right person. You're not just going to get some rando person off the street to run one of your main generation assets. That's not how things are done in the real world. This is how it's done. People are selected, they're groomed, they're prepared, and they're put in there to do a certain agenda. And so you think you're going to go vote for labor and then labor's going to come in and change this? I don't think so. These people are not here for you. There is no credible plan. Now, I do agree with nuclear, but it would take years. In the meantime, you're going to collapse the UK economy. This clown's not going to last. Okay, the problems are too big. This is the sand that the globalists have built that they're standing on. Okay, is the fact that energy underpins everything, and they don't have an energy policy, and it's going to erode their position every time. How is it actionable? Stay long energy stocks are the best performing. Stay long, look where the shortages are and go there. We have a molecule shortage in the world, folks. Here we go. So do you think that these people in the UK, says half of UK adults find it difficult to pay their bills? Do you think that they care about the globalist agenda of Rishi Sunak and his masters? No. Almost half of UK adults are finding it difficult to afford their energy bills, rent, or mortgage payments, new figures have shown. In September, 45% of adults who paid energy bills were finding it very or somewhat difficult to afford them, up from 40% in June. There you go. This is why there's going to be a decade at least of political, social, and economic turmoil in the world, especially in the developed world, because there's a lack of energy and there's no coherent, rational energy policy being put forth. That's it. So if you don't understand what's going on, you're going to be like these people, or like I see people on Twitter, right? I mean, I think it was Exxon, Chevron reported, I think Exxon the best quarter they ever had, Chevron the second best. So you see these morons on Twitter, which I don't comment back to them. What's the point? About the oil companies are making all this money, blah, blah, blah. We need to do something. You have the Biden administration now talking about nationalizing the energy industry in the US. I mean, I don't think that would happen, but I mean, to even say things like that shows you where the mindset is. They have no clue what's going on. They have no clue how these markets work. They have no clue how the energy industry works. They have no clue. And so I don't see things changing in the West politically because all of even the opposition is controlled opposition. Okay. You're not allowed a platform. People have said sometimes, why we don't understand why you don't have more, you should be having 10 times. People don't want to hear the truth. Okay. We're talking about things that you have to think about. You have to be capable of analyzing second and third order effects. Most people, there's somebody that I listen to quite a bit and read their writings, and he has a term that he calls MPAI. Most people are idiots. That doesn't mean people are stupid, but they don't know anything about anything. They don't want to know. They're not curious. We just talked about BASF, shutting down, and all of the products, all those manufacturing processes. What do they feed into? And then where is that supply going to come from when they shut down that Nobody thinks about this stuff. No one cares. The expectation is you go to the light switch and flip it on, the lights come on. You go to the store to buy what you want and it's there. That's it. That's the extent of the thinking. I don't blame people for that, but that's just how it is. And so people are going to complain about this and say, well, we're going to vote labor in. Okay, you're going to get the Labor Party. Well, do you think that those are some radical people that are going to make real changes that care about you? No. They're only in the position they're in because they're ticket takers. They're willing to carry out the agenda. And so actionable intelligence alert is about second and third order thinking and how, we're not here making policy. We're not going to change anything. Yes, I'm an older person and cantankerous and get aggravated and yell at the moon and tell people to get off my front lawn, but that's not going to change anything. What we're trying to do here is identify where the puck is going to be, because we have people that we have to take care of and we have to survive in this world. And so we're going to try to determine what's going to happen with the highest probability events that are going to take place based on what we're looking at. And unfortunately, we have to immerse ourselves in politics and watch what these people are doing, because the policies that they implement or don't implement have tremendous knock-on effects to investing and speculating. It's just that simple. So I was talking with someone about this earlier in the week. Here's the current gas prices in Europe. You see they've plunged, and there's been a lot of media attention on that. And that's because they've had warmer than forecasted weather, warmer than normal weather, which has lowered heating demand, but also storage has been full. But you have to understand something. In most places around the world, you cannot store the amount of energy you need for the winter heating months. Storage is not high enough for that. The storage acts as a buffer for your supply, right? It's kind of like an expansion tank or like a steam drum and a boiler. I mean, you have this extra volume there that can surge or be reduced based on demand, supply and demand. What's interesting is if you see the white line, which is the current price, and that gets all the media attention because, again, journalists and media people are just looking for headlines, and the media cycle is less than 24 hours now. So they look at this, it's so wonderful, prices are down. But if you look at the 3-year out prices, they're still high. And that's because we're in an energy crisis. That's because we don't have enough supply, okay? And so prices in the future are being priced, near the all-time highs, because that's telling the market you need to supply more gas. You need to go out and drill and supply more gas, but that's not or reconcile with the Russians and turn the gas back on. So be aware of that. Okay, that's why we stay long energy. We don't read the headline in the Wall Street Journal or on Bloomberg where it says, look, we're so wonderful, we fixed the problem, when the problem still exists. And so Javier Blas, must follow on Twitter, a lot of good stuff he puts out. Strong words from Saudi Energy Minister Prince Abdulaziz bin Salman. No names named, but clearly directed at the Biden administration's use of the Strategic Petroleum Reserve. Quote, people are depleting their emergency stocks as a mechanism to manipulate oil markets. That's exactly right. The Biden administration has been reducing, around 1 million barrels a day for 6 months at least, to try to keep oil prices down, and consequently hoping to keep gasoline and diesel prices down so that they can get, help out in this midterm election. This is one of the main things that Boobus Americanus looks at, is gas prices, right? This is in their face every other day if they have to go to the gas pump and fill up. Because of the Happy Motoring Society that we have in the US, this directly affects people immediately. And so people are very, Boobus is very attenuated to gasoline prices. As a matter of fact, when gas prices were high, you'd see people go out and interview people, and people will change their vote just based on gas prices. They went to some areas that are predominantly Democratic voting, and people were blaming, they weren't blaming the Saudis, they weren't blaming the Russians, they were blaming the Biden administration. Whether or not that's 100% true, it's not, but that's who gets blamed, whether you like it or not. So, but this is what's happening. And so, again, we're coming to the end of this situation, right? If you listen to some recent podcasts that Harris Kupperman, aka Cuppy, was talking about, he's forecasting, or he thinks, we're going to see all-time highs in the relatively near future in oil prices. Why? Because he thinks we could see anywhere from a 3 to 5 million barrel deficit per day deficit in oil production next year. I don't disagree with him. Think about it. At some point, the million barrels a day from the SPR is going to go away because it's not an unlimited resource, right? They're going to have to stop it at some point. Now they've added some additional releases after the election and into the December. I think it's like 15 million barrels, something like this. Anyway, it's not inexhaustible. So that's going to go away. And remember, you only need small changes in supply and demand at the margin to greatly affect price in a commodity market. We've talked about this ad nauseum. So that million barrels is going away. I was listening to a podcast with Louis Gov of GovCal Research. He's been pretty prescient. He's based in Asia and China, and he's thinking that we should see. Now, he's been wrong for a year because he thought that China would come off the COVID restrictions sooner, but he made a good case about now that Xi's been installed as, emperor for life in China, that we would see a change in the COVID policies, lockdown policies in China. So, if that does happen, if China moves to that, you could see a swing in demand of about 2 million barrels a day, right? Because they're down jet fuel, just regular commuting, that will increase. So now that's your 3 million barrels right there, right? Then you have, as long as we don't slip into a worldwide depression or severe recession, you're still going to have that million barrels a day in growth that comes in oil demand just from the emerging markets, right, and developing markets. So that gets you to 4 million barrels. We already see that shale is not growing because people are not drilling. The majors aren't drilling. It's a lot of maintenance capital and slow, maintain what you have and return capital to shareholders. As a matter of fact, Biden was crabbing about that this week also. He went after Shell specifically. They should be, returning that money to consumers by lowering gas prices. That's not how things work. I mean, this just shows you how clueless these people are. But they think that's going to play. And that's why you start seeing these trial balloons or these people just mouthing off about nationalizing the oil industry, and these wacky, crazy people like Elizabeth Warren and AOC and the squad talking the crazy nonsense that they talk about. No one was talking about helping the oil industry when prices were negative. As a matter of fact, when the previous president wanted to begin filling the SPR when oil was at $27, $30 a barrel, he was mocked and told no by the Congress. Some of the same congressmen now that are supporting the withdrawals and the recent view from the Biden administration that between prices of $67 and $70 a barrel, they would begin refilling the SPR. So this is all, like I said, it's all politics all the time. And the bottom line here is this, okay? This all ties together with inflation and what the Fed's trying to push down demand for products and services by raising rates, using that hammer to run around the house and kill flies, because that's the only tool they have, ostensibly to lower demand. Demand would lower, people would get laid off, you'd have a recession or pullback in economic activity, and prices would come down. That's the theory. But OPEC's, in a position, I think, that if you cause demand for oil to go down, they're just going to cut supply even more. They are not playing around anymore, okay? It's a finite resource. They need a certain amount of money, especially in Saudi Arabia. They're building a $500 billion city in the desert, new city. They need the revenue, okay? They're not playing games anymore. And I'm going to show you the next slide. This explains it. Again, Javier Blas, Saudi energy minister, again, directly responding without naming it to the White House post OPEC cut. Quote, "We hear you are with us or against us." That's how OPEC takes the comments from the United States. I ask, this is the Saudi oil minister, is there any room for we are Saudi Arabia and for the people of Saudi Arabia? Are you picking up on this new multipolar world where people are not kowtowing anymore to the U.S.? People are flipping off the U.S. left and right, okay? The U.S. is a paper tiger. It's lost its ability. Its hegemon is slipping through its fingers. It can no longer run around the world and threaten people and force people to do its bidding. Okay, the Saudis are about Saudi. You see them moving closer to the BRICS countries, moving closer to Russia, closer to China, closer trying to, and so we tell them we're not going to sell them any more weapon systems. Okay, they'll just go buy them from Russia or some other country. It's not, it's not going to be the end of the world. In the meantime, the Saudis, have the most influence inside of OPEC, and OPEC produces 47% of the world's daily oil production. So here we are, whether or not we're actually saying this is how the Saudis are perceiving it. You are with us or against us. This is not how you get win-win outcomes, okay? But this is what the U.S. is doing now. And this is late-stage empire stuff as it's power slipping, as it's, now we have, like I said, we have this tired leadership class. It's worn out, post-war, has no new ideas. All the people are in their 80s that are our leaders. They're incompetent. They're failed, going back to the same failed playbook that they don't have any new ideas. And here we are. Okay, it's just that simple. And so, is it a managed decline? I don't know. I don't even think they're clued in enough. They're just, people are just grabbing whatever they can here as this thing comes apart. And so here's what you have. We don't have any real diplomacy going on. We don't have, this is a 50 or 60, 70-year relationship. And it's being, taken and just bashed against the rocks. For what outcome, I don't know. So this was interesting. Here's a chart from the FT. U.S. ships energy to the world. This is record petroleum exports, folks. And so this is petroleum products, probably, refined products, probably total amount of oil and refined products per day. And this is oil exports. So, this is your SPR. This is, remember, folks, crude grades matter, right? The refineries in the U.S., specifically around the Gulf Coast, are not tuned up to refine the crude that's produced like in the Permian. And so we export that crude and import the types of crude, the heavier grades of crude that the refineries are built for. And a lot of people don't understand that either. So they say, well, why are we exporting this? We should be refining this. This is another example. If you don't understand these things because you don't have a background or you haven't taken the time to look at it, you're going to miss. People are like, well, somebody needs to do something. Why would we be exporting our oil if we're producing here and we need to keep it in the US? Okay, well then, are you going to put incentives in place for the refining companies to change their infrastructure so they can refine that crude? If you're not going to do that, then why would they do that? Especially when you're, Peter Doocy, Fox News guy, White House correspondent, went after the press. I can't remember her name, that gal that's the press secretary, the most incompetent human anywhere. But this woman, it's embarrassing. But regardless, he asked her, he said, why would the oil companies, try to increase production or do these things when this president has said that he's going to try to put fossil fuel companies out of business? So she just looked at him and paused and concluded that day's questioning. She refused to answer the question. And we've provided here on the channel multiple videos. Remember the one with the 14-year-old girl when Mr. Biden was on the campaign trail? Look into my eyes, kiddo. I promise you, we're going to get rid of fossil fuels. Well, that's what they're trying to do. So if you're again, we've talked about this. I'm not going to talk about it again. If you're running an oil company, you're not going to increase production. It's not in this environment. You're not going to upgrade your refineries. You're not going to do anything except for collect the cash and give it to shareholders. And then you're a hero. That's it. But this is interesting. What happens when this goes away? This is mostly your SPR, right? So here we go. BMW to axe UK production of electric Mini and relocate it to China. So evidently there's like 40,000 electric Minis produced in the UK a year. BMW owns Mini Cooper, I guess. And evidently they're going to move that production to China. They're going to continue the internal combustion engine powered minis and continue producing those there at their factory in the UK, but they're moving the electric production to China, which is awesome, right? Because we were told that this new industrial policy, this move to green energy, this transition, right, was going to lead to this plethora, this cornucopia of new jobs and new technologies and new opportunities for all the citizens. And here we are again, moving it to the low-cost production places. Why? Because that's where all the batteries are manufactured for these things. Why? Because it's cheaper and easier to do it in China. You cannot, it's very messy and dirty processes, and they don't want to do them because of the regulatory burden and the costs that are associated here in the West. Move it to China, out of sight, out of mind. BMW is to axe all UK production of the award-winning electric Mini and relocate it to China, dealing a major blow to hopes that Britain could be a global hub for zero-emission vehicle manufacturing. This was in The Guardian, which is a left-wing newspaper. Who in their right mind ever thought the UK was going to be a global hub for zero-emission vehicle manufacturing? See, this is what happens. These politicians just say so. Theresa May, she was one of the ones that said this a long time ago. Okay, where is she? Does anybody know? She's like the third prime minister back. Does anybody go and ask her what happened? Is anybody going to ask Rishi Sunak what's going on? Where's all the jobs? Where's the cornucopia of wealth? Where's the, opportunity? BMW makes 40,000 electric minis per year at its Cowley factory on the outskirts of Oxford. BMW's decision comes after reports from Britain's only planned large-scale battery factory being built by British Volt in the northeast of England, that it will go bust if it does not receive £200 million in a rescue package. Haven't we heard this before? Remember Solyndra? Folks, are you getting the message yet on this stuff? Have you figured it out yet? These are just sops to, people. This is not like workable in the West. Not unless you're going to reduce the regulatory burden, not unless you're going to massively subsidize these things. Only a year ago, Boris Johnson, then Prime Minister, promised at COP26, climate summit in Glasgow, to fund a £1 billion electric car revolution in the UK, quote, creating hundreds of thousands of jobs, unquote. His predecessor, Theresa May, intended that Britain would become a world leader, quote, in electric vehicle manufacturing, and made it one of the, quote, pillars of her short-lived industrial strategy. Here you go. No comment needed. So here's another article by Mark Mills talking about the real costs of EVs. It's a really long article, in depth. Again, if you want to understand the heads we win, tails we win more investment thesis that I have in the Actionable Intelligence Alert newsletter, then this is the kind of stuff that you need to really pay attention to. Okay, I acknowledge that we're going to try to do these things. We're going to try to electrify everything. This is in the West, at least. We're going to try to go to EVs. We're going to try to have this energy transition to green energy. And the tax incentives and the spending will be in the hundreds of billions of dollars. I acknowledge that. Okay, that's the heads we win because the materials don't exist. The tails we win more is because of the hydrocarbons that you need and the minerals resources you need to facilitate that so-called transition. And so it doesn't matter what happens, we win either way as investors and speculators. And so deep diving this thing and understanding why that's going to happen is imperative in my view. So a couple of just short quotes. I put a link to the article. You can read it. It's pretty good. It has some other links in there to other research, which I need to deep dive too. But this is consistent with what we've seen from Mr. Mills in the past. Investors and politicians embracing the vision of an all-electric car future believe that path will significantly reduce carbon dioxide emissions. That's far from clear. A growing body of research points to the likelihood that widespread replacement of conventional cars with EVs would likely have a relatively small impact on global emissions. And it's even possible that the outcome would increase emissions. The issue is not primarily about emissions resulting from producing electricity. Instead, it's what we know and don't know about what happens before an EV is delivered to a customer, namely the embodied emissions arising from the labyrinthine supply chains to obtain and process all the materials needed to fabricate batteries. It's exactly right. If you know anything about mining, like the big mining, think about it. And I'm going to give you a link to a thread that another guy put up who is a very tuned up on copper mining in the process. And if you just look at that, of all of the emissions just that go into extracting the copper ore, it blows all this stuff out of the water. Again, most people just say, okay, what's the problem? I go buy a Tesla, I plug it in, and it's getting its power from solar and wind. It's renewable. It's green. It lowers CO2. And nobody thinks about the materials that go into creating all of that. What are the emissions for all that? That has to be calculated. And so there's a lot of ambiguity around that. That's what basically comes out of the article, is people really haven't nailed this down. But the more they look at it, the less environmentally friendly it actually looks. But people have convinced themselves, right? People like this stuff. They think it's the Jetsons, it's technology. I'm doing something. What's wrong with you, John? Don't you get it? Yeah, I get it. I get the fact that those big mining trucks burn 96 gallons of diesel an hour, regardless if they're moving or just idling. That's what I get. That the shovels that extract the ore, burn dozens of gallons of diesel an hour. Okay. People don't have a clue. And that, what goes into extracting the ore, extracting the copper from the ore. And so that needs to all be incorporated into the emissions calculation for these things. And people aren't, as people are starting to do that, they're finding that this maybe isn't as environmentally friendly as they thought. And here's the maybe I put this up last week, but I'll put it up again. Understanding the copper mining cycle. This guy, kind of blew up on Twitter in the last couple of weeks. I kind of copied or retweeted a lot of his stuff, and it's a long thread. And if you go look at his Twitter feed, he's done a couple of these things now. Even talking about like diesel. So this is this guy's been involved in copper mining. He knows. Here's his observation. It's like a really long thread. I'll put a link to it. I would suggest you read it if you're interested. It says, wind, solar, battery proponents, and ESG bean counters are completely out of touch with copper mining and production. So this is an open pit copper mine, obviously. But he talks about the Kennecott, Utah copper mine, how the process, not just of mining, starting from the drilling, the blasting, all the way through the process of getting the ore to the crushing facility, what goes on there, flotation circuits, all the extraction, the processing, all of that. Okay. No one thinks about it. No one talks about it, how energy intensive it is. And you're not going to electrify that completely. Okay. You're not going to run that. You're not going to have like a wind farm in the background powering all of that. It's not how things work. So I wanted to point this out because, this is staggering to me. Look at what's happening here as we've raised interest rates, and as debt gets rolled over, higher interest rates are being paid now because it seems like the Fed, or the Treasury, didn't term out its debt when we had this long period of low interest rates, where they could have, sold bonds for locked in low yields. I don't know all the numbers, but bottom line is this is a problem, folks. Okay. This is another reason why the Fed's just not going to raise rates to, 7-8%, like some people are suggesting. Okay. And why we have to, this is why I'm more inclined towards the Russell Napier view and Lynn Alden's talked about this too, if you want to look at some of her work, just about how the government doesn't really have an option except for to run a sustained higher level base rate of inflation to try to get, nominal GDP up. That would, through inflation, and then that would lower the debt burden as a percent of GDP. And so it's very complicated. I would suggest that, if you want to look at Russell Napier's work, he talks a lot about this recently. He doesn't get a lot of play as much as he should, but Lynn Alden's talked about this a lot, what the U.S. government basically did after World War II to get the debt burden under control. And so, in the end, it all roads lead to inflation, in my view. And so do you get back to 2%? I don't know. Maybe if you have a severe economic decline or, deep recession / depression, I guess you would. But in the end, they'll print money. They've demonstrated what they will do. And this is, if tax revenues, are going down in a recession, but rates are high, and you're having debt roll off, but it has to get resold. They're constantly in that cycle, right? Debt rolls off as it, whether it's a 1-year T-bill or a 10-year treasury that was issued 10 years ago, it rolls off. And then if you have to sell new bonds and bills at higher rates, this is what happens, right? Your interest burden is increasing. It's like these people that make the minimum payments on their credit cards. They never get ahead of the game. You have to keep piling on more debt. And this isn't a problem until it becomes a problem. It all of a sudden becomes a problem in a financial crisis at some point. But you can't. Is this actionable? Yes. You keep a certain amount of your wealth in precious metals that you hold. That's what I recommend people do. That is insurance against central bank malfeasance. That's what I do. That's what I suggest you do. 5 to 10% seems to be a good for insurance. You don't want to be in a position if we get ourselves in a situation. And what does it do? I look at physical gold and silver not as an investment. I look at it as savings, as a way to keep my dollars from being inflated away by the U.S. government. And so, and then against, shocks to the system, if you will. And contrary to what a lot of people say, that gold and silver have outlived its usefulness, it's an anachronism. I don't believe that. And, you saw what happened. The digital currencies seem to me, in my mind, to be more of a fad, more of a speculative trading sardines that was enabled by a historic amount of low interest rates that enabled not only speculation for anywhere from baseball cards to paintings to these digital currencies. That's not to say that digital currencies don't have their use. As a matter of fact, we're going to talk about later on in the video about where things are heading with the central banks and digital currencies. I think those are coming. But long story short, I'm not 5,000 years of history is on my side vis-a-vis gold and silver. So that was the end of the economics. I'm going to get into the clown world and some of the commentary. This is our favorite guy to listen to. He's out there. He's one of the main advisors to Klaus Schwab at the WEF. This Yuval Noah Harari. There's a video. I'll put a link to it. But this is basically the quote what he says in the video. You will have a small elite that makes all the decisions, even if it doesn't benefit the majority of the population. Haven't we seen that? Isn't that what's happening? If bad comes to worst, scientists will be the Noah's Ark for the elite, leaving the rest to drown. So the point I'm trying to make here, folks, is that these people are not there for you. They're not trying to help you. They're not interested in your issues or solving your problems, okay? Or making you safe, making you prosperous, okay? The system in the West is imploding. There's an energy shortage that could be structural, okay? There's a very good possibility that the elites understand what I think I might understand, which is we're on a finite planet with trying to have unlimited growth. Now, I'm not a Malthusian, but there seems to be a problem with oil production in the world. Can it be solved by a huge investment in new production? Well, we'll see. But Matt Simmons, in his book Twilight in the Desert, didn't think so, and that was 15 years ago. So that's something else I'm researching and pursuing. The debt burdens in the West are unpayable and tremendous, 200% and 300% of GDP. I just showed you the problem with the interest payments on the U.S. debt. Pensions cannot be paid, Social Security benefits. So these structural, long-term, unsolvable problems exist. And so these people can see this. And so they have the wealth and power. They want to hold on to it. So what do you think is going on here? Do you think that they don't talk about this and not conspiring? And this guy's telling you right to your face. This guy talks to these people. He advises these people. I mean, I don't like this crumb, but this is what he says. So I'll put a link to the video. You can watch it. Here is the Bank of International Settlements. This, I don't know, Jabba the Hutt looking character. But he's talking about central bank digital currencies. The Bank of International Settlements, basically, a globalist organization, okay, that, a lot of the globalists in the West, this is their central bank of central banks, if you will. Central bank digital currencies will be programmable, ultimately giving the issuer being the state central banks, control over how it is spent by the recipient. Your freedom to purchase fuel, meat, flights, fertilizer, or make maybe even political contributions, or to maybe, somebody is being targeted by the state and wants legal assistance and puts out a plea for a fundraiser, you can't contribute. All kinds of really fun things can happen. You saw Mr. Trudeau, what he did. This guy is a child of the WTF. He's like, Klaus Schwab's adopted son, and that's the test pool up there in Canada for all of this, okay? And of course, they want to tie this to a carbon credit score because, CO2, which is not a pollutant, I refuse to accept the fact that CO2 is a pollutant. It's a naturally occurring gas that's used by plants for photosynthesis, okay? It's not a pollutant. But this is what they've done. They've convinced everybody. And so they've gotten to the children. So the next generation that's coming up, by God, is going to fall lock, stock, and barrel for this, okay? And so this is going to be couched as to your benefit. It's going to make things easier. It's going to make things better for you. None of the things that these people do is for your benefit. Do you understand that? None of these things that these people did. How is this war in Ukraine benefiting the middle classes and the working classes in the West? It's not. It's decimating them. To what is the end goal here for the United States and the Western Europeans? Democracy? I'm not even interested in their form of democracy anymore because it doesn't exist. Was Rishi Sunak subject to the votes of the UK population voters? No, he was not. You saw until this Maloney gal got in Italy, the previous Draghi, he was put into power. That's what they do. So these people have an agenda, which is to maintain their wealth and power at any cost. And I don't even want to get into the other ideas that I have because it's not suitable for this format, okay, of why this is happening. Okay, but this is what they're doing. This is not a conspiracy theorist. This is a guy from the Bank of International Settlements telling you what they're going to do. So here's your robot Rishi Sunak saying the exact same thing when he was Chancellor of the Exchange, right? Or whatever they called over there. Basically the, Treasury Secretary, I guess, of the UK. That's what he was before he became, before he was installed as the Prime Minister of the UK. So here he is talking about digital currencies and how wonderful they're going to be for everyone. Are you picking up on the vibe yet? Have you figured out what they're trying to do? Do you understand now why a multipolar world? I mean, I don't say it's going to be better, but what do you, this is one of the things I'm thinking about now. How do you get out of this? How do you escape from this? Because this is where they're taking everybody. As this crisis gets worse, they're going to come up with these, in my view, ways to save us all. And one of them is going to be the central bank digital currencies. After they destroy their own currencies, you see the pound, the yen, the euro going down in value. And so the thing will be, well, the central bank digital currencies will, and of course it'll be couched, and we can, this is how we can, find out who all the drug traffickers are, child pornographers, trafficking. It'll be couched like that. Terrorism, we'll be able to control that because everything will go through the central bank, and our artificial intelligence will be able to know what people are doing. That's how they always couch it, right? It's always for your safety, or it's always for some undefined benefit that it will be better for everyone. And in the end, it's for their benefit. They can control you then. They will have full control. If you can control what somebody spends their money on based on some subjective score, like a credit score or a, social credit score like in China, then you control them fully. That's what they're trying to implement, folks. That's not a conspiracy. They're telling you what they're going to do. Of course, they say it's for your benefit, but it's not. Recall your life. Try to be a thinking person. Has most policies that these people, your government, has ever implemented, how has it really benefited you? Who does it really benefit? That's all I ask people to think about, because the interstate road system in the US. Okay, that was a pretty good idea. What else? What else you got? All right, guys, that's it for this week. A little bit of a rant there. I didn't talk about the Cameco quarterly results. I'll get on that next week. I didn't have time to review it fully. But actionable, what's happening? We're still on the energy shortage. It's until we have the sufficient changes in government around the world, specifically in the West, that are going to be pro-energy and not, diverse concentrated forms of energy. Until we see that, then we're going to have this energy crisis. As long as we have this continuing, deal with Russia, then we're going to have we're going to have these discombobulations in the world economy. And what we said was going to happen is now happening. German industry is now shutting down permanently. Those were the words of the BASF CEO, not my words, not a blogger, not a conspiracy theorist. The CEO of the world's largest chemical company said that we will be shutting down some of these facilities permanently because they are not competitive anymore. Not in this, not when all the inputs are through the roof. All the energy inputs and the feedstocks that you need, which are petroleum based. All right, guys, that's it for this week. Appreciate you, and we'll talk to you next week.